shores for December and the snow for the sea. Sleeping out of guest bedrooms with bags.
Long time no see, isn't it? This was recorded, just so you all know, back in February of 2020. This guest, Simon Penrose, to be honest, I didn't really look much into it. I talked to him over email. He had reached out. He wasn't sure if he wanted to do Broken Silicon or Flyover States. And I said, well, you know what? It sounds like you want to talk a lot about industrialism, and there will be a bit of history in there, and maybe we'll get into some social issues, so why not just make this a Flyover States episode? And so I do apologize to Simon, who has his own YouTube channel. That is his name, Simon Penrose, for taking so long to get this out there. But you know what? Here's the episode. We get into a lot of interesting discussions, education between America and Sweden, immigration, and most of the conversation, the coming industrial revolution, and how it could bring a resurgence of those smaller businesses once they're able to compete with the technology of larger firms. So I'm oversimplifying it. We have a lot of things we discuss, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for coming on. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Simon Penrose. I'm an expat living in Sweden, and I work in metal fabrication. Previously, I've worked in many different fields, and the most recent, before my current position, was teaching. Today, I'm going to be talking about the past, present, and future of industrial revolutions.
And so before we get into that, though, I do just have some general questions kind of to frame things up. So I think you say expat, but I think you said over email that you've been living in Sweden, right? Pretty much the majority of your life. Is that correct?
That's correct. My family moved here before I had any say in the matter, and I've been stuck here since. I have a wife now, a son. Mm-hmm. They're both sleeping downstairs, so I'm going to try to not wake them up. That's what's keeping me here. Although I will say this, my employer is getting more and more international orders, mm-hmm. some of them coming from the United States. So there is a chance that could be a vehicle for me to make a return if I become involved in any sort of effort of starting up a production unit stateside.
Mm-hmm. And so how, if you don't mind me asking, can I ask, like, what state were you born in and at what age you went to Sweden?
Massachusetts. Family moved to Sweden when I think I was 3 years old.
So what made them decide to move to Sweden?
That's a bit of a story. Most of it I don't know. Mm-hmm. Most of it I don't think my parents are even willing to share, but I strongly suspect it has a lot to do with my father failing to find steady work in the States.
And so he saw a posting for a job in Sweden then, and he was like, well, let's just go there?
Yeah, well, that's what he knew.
Frankly, very American of him to be willing to go somewhere so far away for work, if you ask me. But so, yeah, I mean, you sent, so, all right, so then you grew up in Sweden. I almost just asked the question, what was it like to grow up in Sweden?
I can to a degree compare it, since I have, after all, spent most of my summers as a youngster with my grandparents. And I have attended school in the United States, just not full terms. I will say that perhaps the main difference in the school environment would be discipline, where in Sweden, the discipline that you see in students and teachers is much, much reduced to what you normally experience in the United States, which is a major problem.
So you're saying again, there's more or less discipline in Sweden?
Much less.
Much less. Well, I'm curious, what makes you think there's more discipline in American schools?
Well, I am, of course, speaking in generalities, mm-hmm. but in Sweden there is the obligation to educate the students is not placed on the shoulders of parents. primarily. It's not the duty of parents to get their children educated. It is the duty of the schools.
Of the state to make sure they are.
Of the state, yes.
That's their perception, yeah.
What that results in then is a situation where if a student in a Swedish school misbehaves and is completely indifferent towards his own education, what will happen is no ill consequences will befall them.
Well, I mean, I find that an interesting thing to say, because in America, I don't see that as any different. I mean, and I grew up here, and what I would say in America is you just have to remember that there's 50 different states, all different types of schools, and man, the educations in some of the schools in America vary quite radically from what you might expect in a different school across the country. But I mean, there's a huge dropout rate in America. I don't know that there's, in some places there's an onus for sure, but I mean, it's certainly not my group of friends. All my friends graduated, went to college. You know, that's the group I kind of ran with. But I mean, there's a lot of people that drop out in America. I mean, they think I still hear it's an epidemic, even if I don't really know anyone. I guess I have one friend who did, but he, finished his education later anyways.
Okay. I've seen, of course, many horror stories of what it can look like in the United States. And of course, in states like California, you have maybe 3 to 5% of the teaching staff that are not actually qualified as teachers.
Which is a whole other discussion too, yeah.
Yeah, in Sweden, I don't have the figures for last year, but in 2016, of all the people that were hired full-time as teachers in Sweden, 2/3 of them were not qualified. They were not credentialed teachers. They had not finished the 5 years of college studies that's required for you to be qualified as a teacher to gain your credentials. 2/3, and within 5 years, 20% of all teachers then actually do graduate from their college studies. They're out of their teaching positions. So within 5 years, 20% of them is gone. They're doing something completely different. And of course, the American school system has a lot of problems.
If you wouldn't mind, I have to jump in, though, about that, because in America, it's kind of a similar problem, but different factors. So, well, they may all be, and I'm making the biggest air quotes ever, credentialed. I got to tell you, it's pretty easy. And I know if there's going to be teachers listening that, and so I really have to preface this, that think I'm insulting teachers, because I'm not. A lot of, like, for instance, my honors chemistry teacher in high school literally started his own website where he would send CDs to underprivileged areas all over the country. I think he actually made decent money, but he wasn't even tenured because he didn't want to be tenured. He wanted to prove he was a good teacher. And there's teachers like that all over the country. One of my best friends, his wife's a teacher, and you can tell she's like basically picking up the slack for the other teachers around her who aren't doing the job. Difference in America, though, is all of these people are credentialed, and half of them can get that degree like it's nothing, right? And I've heard about, like, I can't speak for Sweden, and I can't pretend that I'm an expert. But what I have heard is that it's a lot harder to become a teacher in Germany, for instance, whereas in America, it's kind of a fallback decision of people who get these communications degrees. The communications degrees are just handed out like candy. I know some people, again, will get mad at me for saying that, but it's like, look, I'm a mechanical engineer, and it was a lot. Not everyone can get through those classes, but if anyone can get a certification, I'm not sure what that certification is worth. And I've had so many teachers that, again, it's like, why are teachers paid so little? It's because half of the ones I had did not. Some of them just straight up didn't teach, right? So I will say this is not a uniquely Swedish problem. And what's interesting is you're looking at factors that are different, but it seems like a lot of the results are the same.
Right. Well, as far as I understood, from back when I was looking at it, it is, yes, easier to get credentialed in the United States as a teacher. especially if you have a previous degree. So it's a wonderful fallback decision if you are qualified in some other field. You're thinking, well, maybe I could, hang out with some kids in high school and, pass on some of my knowledge. And it's a little tougher than that, really, especially in most schools. But in Sweden, if you're starting from scratch, it's 5 years of college studies. That's what you're looking at. And the pay is awful. It's terrible. You may find a position where you are highly paid, relatively speaking. It's, say, $4,000 a month. Mm-hmm. That's what passes for a high-paying teaching job in Sweden, but that's also going to be someplace like Stockholm where the living costs are.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that, right? Like 4,000 really euro, bonkers. Right?
Yeah. But anyway, you said you didn't want to badmouth teachers. Well, I don't.
Well, I know teachers who are hard workers, right?
Yeah.
So you can't make a generalization.
I've seen some too, but and yes, even though you need to spend 5 years in order to get credentialed, I wouldn't say that even a small sliver of that is actually meaningful knowledge that you're able to put to use.
So do you have any examples?
That's the real actual knowledge.
Right, because you say, just to make it clear why I asked that.
Well, this is just what my wife is telling me, really. She is a teacher.
Mm-hmm. The discipline question is one that I think is a much longer discussion where I would want to do more research before having that one. I do find it interesting, though, the teacher thing, though, because there is and this is something no one wants to talk about in America, is the teacher problem, because, well, frankly, either you're someone typically on the right who hates teachers, or you're someone on the left who says all teachers are great. And the truth is, well, there's good teachers and bad teachers, but I do find that interesting that you say that they're not getting credentialed, whereas, and there will be people who get mad at me, it is my opinion that becoming a teacher is very, very easy. I mean, I remember one example in high school where there was a teacher who was trying to show this equation to teach, it was an honors math class, so it wasn't easy. But she was saying we all got this question wrong, and then one of the smartest kids in the class, besides me, of course, now he gets up and goes to the board, and he corrected it for her. And he's like, no, you're wrong. You gave us all the wrong answer. We got it right. And I remember seeing that and thinking, so how can she become a math teacher if a student stands up and shows her how to solve the equation better? I mean, and if he wouldn't have done that, we would have all gotten a B on we would have all lost 10% on our tests. So I guess I will say that it's just, I just find that so interesting that different factors are having these, and if you don't make teacher maybe I would argue, and I'm just spitballing, like a revered position or one that pays better and not everyone can easily become, you're going to be stuck with a lot of teachers who just don't do their job, I guess I just find that so interesting in Sweden.
The curious thing about teaching as a profession is, of course, it's very easy to get into. It's very easy to be a teacher. It's
in most places
extraordinarily easy to just download some coursework from Google or whatever, and you just load that up for the students and watch this, whatever, fill out the questionnaire at the end, and you're done. It's very, very hard to be a good teacher because it requires a lot of you.
It's a lot of different skills.
It's a very, very highly G-loaded profession, which is to say requires a lot of intelligence to be good at it consistently. And
it takes passion and intelligence.
Yes. It also requires, of course, a good amount of interpersonal skills. So you can't go into teaching being really intelligent but struggling with
which I've had plenty of those,
either students who are far too agreeable, far too disagreeable, and yourself not being able to deal with the interpersonal conflicts between students themselves, which of course is also one of those fantastic challenges of the teaching profession. What do you do when one half of the classroom is fighting the other half of the classroom on the floor?
Mm-hmm. And so is that why you want to move back or quote unquote back? I would say you've basically been Swedish the whole time if you moved there at 3, but is that why you want to move to the United States, because you think it might be a better experience, or that you're tired of dealing with these specific problems? Although, again, I'm warning you, a lot of those problems are here, man. You're not just going to the promised land. There's problems everywhere.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that things would be better in the United States. But I am watching the situation. Of course, now I have a family, so I'm very much concerned about the future and what it might hold. I want to at least be aware of what my options are.
Mm-hmm. So I guess let's move forward. Then you reached out. So what do you do? What's your job right now?
Oh, I'm in metal fabrication.
Mm-hmm.
So I make stuff out of sheet metal, square stocks, you name it. Mostly what I do is I weld aluminum, make ambulance ramps.
Mm-hmm. And when you say you make, what is your title though? Like, because what does that mean? Like, what's your day to day? It doesn't need to go in depth, right? But like roughly.
Well, the company is very small, so I believe my title is welder, but it's a very fluid position. So I've been a project lead on a number of things. For example, we had to do some redesign of an old product that we had for the Norwegian market, which were these cash registers. And my task then was, getting the wiring and the electronics side of that working properly.
Mm-hmm. And so you actually specifically reached out to me because you wanted to talk about the, the way I describe it, and you're free to correct me. Obviously, this isn't the exact correct term, but like AR measuring. So some sort of device that you can wear on your head, right? And then it looks at the angles or lengths of objects you're working on and actually tells you down to, I think you said 3 decimal places, the measurement. Is that correct?
Yes. Of course, I'm going to be going into detail about this, but it is my view, and is speculation, but it is informed speculation, that once we get to a point where we are able to wear head-mounted AR systems that are able to give us instantly very accurate measurements, then that is going to herald in a new industrial revolution. And it's not going to be a minor change, it is going to be a major change. Because most of the lost productivity that we see in the manufacturing industry today is really just down to faulty measurement. Either where the specified measurements are wrong for the part that's being produced, or where what is produced and then passes through quality control is divergent from what it should be in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just to give people an idea, right? Like everything, I think so many people who don't work in manufacturing, which I suppose is most people technically, don't understand how much effort actually goes into making every little thing they have and making sure that if they buy a certain product, it's the same as the other product someone else bought. It's really not as simple as designing something on a computer and then the machine sticks it out. Like, for instance, I worked at General Motors, and the amount of effort that goes into every single little button, every single seat part, I was a validation engineer in the car, is incredible. There are entire data sheets that are like 30 pages long for every component in that car, and they have like 3 ways of making sure it is within specifications when it comes out. And then there will be one engineer in charge of every type of product who will then go to every supplier of every little part and say, how are you going to be sure, for instance, this will be exactly this length every time? And it's on the onus of the supplier to prove it, right? And so many of the problems we had really were just the dimensions were off. And I still see
Yeah.
that working in the automotive industry now. Like now I'm more in the sales end of it, but I'm in charge of, guiding a program forward, really. I'm the forward facing person to the customer. And it's like half of the delays, half the problems we've had is because we get a part back and that metal part was out of tolerance by like 2%. But if it's a 2% variance and then the other part has a 2% variance, it just won't snap into place.
Yeah, and even if there are no errors in manufacturing, just the act of calibrating the tools and doing the quality control on what's being produced, taking parts to a measuring station, to a surface plate, and getting accurate measurements, just the act of doing that wastes an enormous amount of time. Of course, it isn't a waste of time as things are now, because it's the only way of doing it. But if we get to a point where having a large 6 by 4 feet surface plate is no longer necessary, then that's going to have a major, major impact, especially for small scale manufacturing, which is now something that we're seeing change. It's perhaps the single largest data point that we should really stand out to you if you're looking at manufacturing industry as a whole. That's the resurgence of the cottage industry. Of course, cottage industry was all that existed back in the good old days before the Industrial Revolution really took off. And
why don't you say what cottage industry is? Just how would you define it in a few sentences?
Cottage industry is, John or Bob making something in their garage and selling to their neighbor. So it's locally made, locally sourced, small scale. And again, back before the Industrial Revolution, that's how everything was made. You had your blacksmith in the village who would make your plows, who would make your trowels, who would make your draw knives. And if you needed something made, that's who you went to, that's who you relied to. And the local market was really just that. It was the local market. There was very few wares coming from outside. And the first Industrial Revolution, what kicked that off was, of course, the metal lathe and micrometers. Although some people argue that what really kicked the first Industrial Revolution off and made it take off was free enterprise and, perhaps most importantly, safe banking, which would really be the reason why Britain was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution and not France. The metal lathe was invented by a Frenchman, but what they lacked was, of course, a society in which free enterprise was able to take off.
And who's going to fund this? I mean, if you're going to produce 1,000, yes, it's very interesting that you have interchangeable parts, but interchangeable parts mean mass production, which requires a lot of bankrolling to produce those parts in one location. And if you don't have a way to, frankly, exchange value in the first place and reliably go to get that value, I mean, that's very true.
And replaceable parts and large-scale manufacturing, the assembly line manufacturing, was, of course, what kicked off the second Industrial Revolution. And, of course, with the advance of steam power to electric power, too. But really what made that possible was gauge blocks, small square blocks of very, very finely machined steel, which were first invented by a Swedish man called Carl Edvard Johansson from Eskilstuna. What he did was he just took his wife's sewing machine, and using that he ground steel blocks to very, very fine tolerances. And as a consequence of that, Henry Ford, he considered Carl a very, very important business partner, and he called them Joe Blocks. Many people still do call them Joe Blocks after the man who invented them. Just these very, very finely engineered square blocks that can be used as a reference when calibrating other measurement tools. And they're not cheap.
No.
Really not. If you want to get a decent set of shop grade gauge blocks, they're like $1,500.
Mm-hmm.
So, you compare that to a PC, and everything just pales in comparison. You want to get a decent surface plate, that's another $1,500, and that's just for two things which allow you to find a reference plane. Nothing else. No micrometers. You want micrometers for inner diameter. Oh, that might be another $1,000. A set of micrometers for outer diameters might be another 1,000 or more. Things get really crazy when you start looking at measurement tools. And measurement tooling itself is a very small industry, but it has, of course, enormous impact for the rest of all of manufacturing. And now the big changes that we're seeing in measurement devices is, of course, related to machine vision. So optical measurement instruments that allow you to very quickly get very accurate measurements through automated processes.
Right,
sometimes,
and anyone can get these devices compared to how expensive it used to be. Is that your point?
Essentially, yes. They are comparatively much cheaper. They might not be cheaper to purchase initially. Certainly no. But the major benefit of course, the ease of operation and the much reduced maintenance that they incur on you.
Well, yeah, I mean, maintenance, right? That's such a big, I mean, and if you go back on an example I could come up with, if you look at some of the older sports cars, they could compete really well with even, premium cars from 10, 20 years later. But those first truly good sports cars require an enormous amount of maintenance from a skilled mechanic and sometimes a mechanic that only knows the intricacies of one car's problems. When I say one car, I don't mean one model. I mean, he just knows this one has this engine block that does this. And the example, the proliferation of just like these standards in the automotive industry eventually led to the point where it's like, look, man, if you get a Chevy Spark right now, it's a lot faster than a Corvette from the 70s. And it's and to talk about how much more comfortable and safe it is, and it's interesting you talk about how, another example I can think of is it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen the YouTube channel, this is a bit off subject, but In Range TV, where they were talking about how, and this is a kind of almost like a gun history channel, but they also talk about tactical stuff sometimes. And they were talking.
In Range and Forgotten Weapons for years and years. Yeah,
me too, of course, as you can probably tell by me bringing them up. One example they brought up was a question from a reader mail was like, when could they have made an AK-47? And they were like, well, one that worked well, probably the 1860s, and it would have taken an enormous amount of money, and each round would have cost as much as a gun for it to fire, but it probably would have worked about as well as now, except it would have been a lot heavier. And they said, and then when could they have made one that could have been somewhat mass produced? I don't know, probably the 1910s if they knew what to look for. But the real innovation was just the ability to mass manufacture the ammo quick enough for it to even fire it, and even understanding what a gun needed to be, because they were debates, no, we need them to shoot 3 kilometers, not fire 10 a second. These debates and that type of stuff. Like, could we have made some of the cars we have now back then? Yeah, but you couldn't have mass manufactured them. And the ease of use of, these newer technologies, a lot of them brought on by computers. This is where I start to get to my point, is when you start to see these startups appearing, not just in automotive, which some automotive, there are starting to be legitimately startups for like scooters and stuff where it was really 5 people. And because they have 3D printers and the ability to measure more accurately with computer devices, they can, as long as it's a good idea, make something that competes with someone who produces 1 million a year. as long as they have the creativity. And I mean, I think, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is this whole cottage industry thing is a cycle we keep seeing repeated. And I think you're right. We're going into one right now where the proliferation of these devices and stuff, it's going to make it so almost anyone can do quite a bit. And the last example I will give is when people talk about how expensive some computer gaming parts are, like their graphics cards and stuff. It's like, you understand that like a 15 teraflop graphics card is the equivalent of a supercomputer from 10 years ago. And once everyone has a gaming PC that's also a supercomputer, you can use that for a lot more than just gaming. And people have realized that, and that's one reason prices go up. But yeah, go on.
Actually, since you brought up InRange, I remember watching Ian's video on the Lamate revolver.
Right.
He's made several. And what is always fascinating...
And for those who don't know, this is arguably just the best revolver from the American Civil War. It held 9 rounds, had an underbarrel shotgun.
They are fantastic.
Yeah, it's been one of my...
Fantastic.
It's a fascinating revolver. I mean, again, right, 9 rounds, an underbarrel shotgun, and the thing worked fantastically. It was accurate. It was the best revolver. Everyone wanted one if they found one on the battlefield. But go on.
Yeah. They were also enormously expensive, of course, but they were absolutely beautifully manufactured. They're astonishingly finely engineered and made. But of course, is that what the Confederate cause needed? Did they need these enormously expensive, very, very fine revolvers, or did they need, mass production of firearms that were just good enough? And that's kind of getting to the point that I'm going to bring up here. It is that what is required for what is required for a technology to be truly revolutionary isn't for it to, appear in a form that, sure, people could use, but it would be very, very expensive. It's for it to appear in a form that is good enough for it to be used widely.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing now is lots and lots of people trying to develop virtual reality that is good enough for people to want to desire it. And Valve, they're making a push now with Half-Life Alyx in order to make the sales argument for the the HTC headset that they have branded. Anyhow, we're seeing the same thing in augmented reality. There are a lot of companies that have enormous incentives to develop augmented reality solutions that are good enough. Because as soon as someone really does hit goal with something that they can use in a sales pitch to people, where people are going to, perk up and go, wow, that is something that will be really great for us. That's when things are really going to take off. Now, currently, the state of augmented reality, at least for industrial applications, is rather limited. So you've got companies like Microsoft and others that have developed augmented reality headsets, either monocular or binocular. Most of them are really just helmet-mounted displays. Some of them also have sensors on them, cameras and time-of-flight sensors, in order to do real-time spatial mapping with just the device you're wearing. Although the main problem and the reason why they rarely sell, especially not compared to the regular iPad or smartphone augmented reality solutions, is, well, it's kind of like virtual reality. Back when the Oculus was really hyped to high heavens on Kickstarter.
Years before it even came out, yeah.
Yeah, people were really sold on this idea of stepping into the virtual world and having this great immersive experience with a 3D environment. And then when they try on these goggles, they realize, you can see the pixels and the frame rate is kind of wonky, and you end up getting seasick.
Yeah.
So the main teething problems facing augmented reality solutions today is, of course, latency, accuracy of spatial mapping, so that what you're seeing tracks the surfaces well.
Their wires suck. They're completely cumbersome. They suck. I'm not afraid to say it. They suck.
Major hurdle.
Like, people will look back in 20 years if we do figure this out, which, I mean, I think we will. And they'll say, I cannot believe people were willing to spend an hour hooking everything up. I mean, I listen to some gaming podcasts, and they talk about how, like, no, every time I've used my VR device, it's been incredible. What a fun couple hours. And I actually burned like 1,000 calories using it. It was so much fun. But like most weekends, you just kind of want to watch Netflix, boot up Battlefield, or, you know, play something relaxing. Because, I mean, you work all week, and just knowing, and I mean, I have room. You know, you can see behind me, like, I have room to play in VR. I have a house, and I have my PlayStation 4's VR device there, and it's hooked up. But still, just taking that 10 minutes to push the table out of the way. Make sure it's calibrated. It's so annoying. It's so annoying.
Yeah, and you don't even have any kids that leave toys out all over.
No. I have a dog. She does leave toys.
But the interesting thing is, of course, that most people have some sort of relationship to augmented reality already. Of course, the single most common use case scenario for augmented reality, and the one that perhaps most people have actually enjoyed, and really is good enough, one is Instagram.
Right.
Who doesn't like making themselves look like a dog? Or no, augmented reality, the use case scenarios are really rather limited today. At least when you're talking about things that are good enough. Mostly we're talking gimmicks, of course. But, you know, in medical fields, if you could have a nurse who wears virtual reality, augmented reality goggles, and is able to very quickly with them identify a vein, that's going to make many lives much more comfortable. And it's in areas like that we're going to see early adoption take place. Firefighters, for example, also wearing augmented reality devices to allow them to more easily navigate through, smoke-filled buildings. That's also going to be one of those places where there is going to be a big push to get this technology working, because here we're talking about people's lives, the most precious things we have. And if we're able to save a life through the use of a technology that might not be good enough, but could at least help some,
practically it works.
That's that's a multi-billion-dollar industry there just on that alone.
Well, I mean, it doesn't need to be able to be capable of photorealistic gaming for it to really take off in another use case. I mean, actually, if anyone's seen uploads of like, the example I would give is fighter helicopter pilots gunning. Like if you see something like that online and then you play Battlefield, you'll go, wow, actually the graphics of the camera in this fake helicopter in the video game look significantly better than what they have in the real helicopters. But they don't need it. All they need is a white dot to show up, and it works pretty much as well. But back to AR in the cottage industry.
Back to AR in the cottage industry. Of course, a lot of what's driving the growth of the cottage industry that we're seeing now is, in part, CNC manufacturing, computer-aided manufacturing, computer-aided design, which makes it easier for people to prototype things very rapidly. Without having to get in, consultant firm, without having a team of draftsmen, getting the plans to the plant before you can actually get something back. But it's also just the fact that we're developing these more and more interconnected markets where it's easier to find manufacturers close to you, at rates that are agreeable to your budget. But the real big tipping point that we're going to be seeing with augmented reality is when you're able to use augmented reality systems in conjunction with distributed aperture systems, which cameras, multiple cameras, and time-of-flight sensors, that the spatial mapping capabilities allow you to get accurate measurements instantly. So without having to take your workpiece, go to a measuring station, get measurements, go back, or if you're on a construction site, say you're putting in the rebar for a foundation, you can just see instantly in front of you on a helmet-mounted display.
Right.
Okay, this is where
that removes so much human error too. Just the fact that it's scanning in front of you.
Yeah. It
says a number, and your stupid human hands aren't moving things around. I mean, most of the mistakes are human error, frankly. I mean,
yeah, it's going to be huge. You're just integrating that technology with building information modeling, where you're able to see the plans for what you're building in the different stages as you're doing it, getting the measurements as you're doing it. That's going to remove a lot of these losses that we're seeing today from people having to leave their current site or leave their current station in order to get the tools they need to carry out a measurement. So no more reaching for a tape measure, no more reaching for a protractor, no more reaching for the laser to get a measurement. You just have it instantly on your display. That's going to be where we're seeing the tipping point in the next big industrial revolution, where the losses from faulty measurement, losses from taking measurements, are going to be reduced to a point where productivity just goes zip.
Something that is almost impossible to quantify before it happens. Like that it could be an exponential increase, but we don't know. I mean, actually, an example I would give that, again, is kind of out of left field, is it's like, I have a pretty beastly PC, and in fact, the app I use for rendering my videos for Moore's Law is Dead don't really use all 16 of my cores, frankly, and they probably could get done a little faster using another app. But the fact of the matter is the app I use is so easy to use and so easy to drag and drop and move and correct the audio quickly that it's not about that. The reason I have a beast PC is I can have a bunch of tabs open at once doing research, recording audio and rendering at the same time, and just not having to stop and grab something else, reboot my PC. Because frankly, if you do a bunch of rendering work, a thing no one talks about is that your PC just gets slower the longer it's turned on. Like, I don't need to reboot. I don't need to do this. The coherency and the concurrency of just being able to do everything at once and spit out a thing quickly is much more important than me rendering the video in 4K or using an app that adds an extra visual effect at the end. For me, and it's all because once you lose, it's so hard to quantify the creativity, one, and two, just the amount of time lost reworking, switching focus. That loss of productivity by switching your focus. I mean, people really can only concentrate for like 15 minutes at a time, and if you don't interrupt what they were doing, I imagine a lot of workers building things could probably build 4 times this stuff in the same amount of time, if I had to guess.
Sure, but then you also have to get to a point where, of course, what you're wearing, first of all, is capable of getting you what you need, getting it there quickly, and being tolerable for a full workday. And until we're there,
sure,
people are going to struggle with that idea. But as far as augmented reality in industry goes, where we will see the initial large-scale adoption, and this I can pretty much guarantee, is in remote assistance. So instead of calling up a consultancy or getting someone to the site you're on in order to take advantage of their expertise to either repair something or to finish whatever it is you're working on, the ability to simply have them, join you in a TeamViewer-like experience on a helmet-mounted display, where they're able to see what you see from your perspective and able to guide your hands. That, I think, is going to be the first large-scale adoption of augmented reality in industry that we're going to see.
Yeah, just put on the headset and it's like, no, this is my problem. Look, like I work in Peoria and I had to go to one of our customers. And it's like, no, this is the problem with this line on this engine. Why don't you come in today? Which is not hard to do, 15-minute, 20-minute drive to where I needed to go. But like, if I could have just put on a headset, or actually better yet, just my engineer I work remotely with, if he could have put on the headset himself, or like, heck, I could have brought a thing there that has cameras, and if he just, in Indiana puts on the headset and is like, oh, I see what the problem is, like that.
But even
3D.
if it's just through a phone, even that is going to have major implications.
Oh, sure. Phones are getting 3D cameras now sometimes too, so you can see where.
Yeah, most of the last gen, or I believe current gen now, flagships are going to be coming out with time of flight sensors. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be more or less de facto standard from now on out, I guess. Which is going to be interesting to see how they're going to incorporate that in software, because, of course, software also has to keep up. But engineers, I believe, are going to be the ones leading the way, because, sure, you could use augmented reality headsets as a way of accelerating training, but really, are you creating a better technician by training him faster? Not necessarily. But you are absolutely going to increase the productivity of your engineers if you can keep them in their office instead of having to send them off-site time and time again.
Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting how much, like, at the same time I talk to people and there's this worry about automation removing jobs, which it will remove some, I'm sure. But there's also a lot of interesting debates.
It might remove some jobs.
Right, but there's also this debate of like, well, maybe there's just more people can do that we didn't know we would have them doing in the future.
I don't necessarily think that what we're going to be seeing is the loss of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
What we're going to be seeing is the transformation of the required skills.
Right.
So where previously you would have someone sweeping the floor, you now have a Roomba.
Yeah.
Right. So does that mean that the person sweeping the floor no longer is able to sweep any floors and is now doomed to starve? Maybe not, but they should probably expand their skill set.
Mm-hmm.
The trouble with that is, of course, will we be getting to a point where you have increased demands to where you no longer can at all find enough qualified people who are able to take the high skill, very highly abstract problem
That's what I'm worried about.
Jobs. So you need
creativity.
Maybe.
Because the more we automate, the more we have machine learning do the repetitive tasks for us, the more you just need to be a creative individual with initiative. And that's not everyone. That is a problem I see coming.
No. Creative people who are industrious are very, very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the ones who are talented and skilled. Very rare. Those people are precious, and if you find them, you should take advantage of them to the fullest.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so what do you think about solutions? Because I've thought about this a lot. I've talked to my brother Dan about this multiple times, probably not in any podcast, but we're brothers, so we talk a lot. And like, I think at a certain point, if you go back and watch those black and white, like, I don't even know what they were. I think they showed them before movies in movie theaters, like weird, like, look at what we're working on. Oh, GE's got the newest, those types of videos. And like one thing they talked about, I know they're hilarious. All the time back in the 50s and 60s was just like, soon there will be the 20-hour work week. And that's because your robots will be doing the work for you. And it's like, well, that's not really what's panned out. But we are innovating. Life is standard of living across the entire world. It's just gone up. It's just gone up in the past 50 years universally, even if some places have more than others. And you go, well, certainly, eventually, may we just have to accept that. Who knows what the number is? I'm just throwing them out. 20%, 30% of people aren't going to be doing these most important jobs, and we might just have to accept that some people don't have don't have something useful they can contribute anymore when we've automated out the sweeping jobs and the jobs above the sweeping jobs.
Well, the big trouble there is, of course, one, how do you quantify into the future? How do you accurately predict the level of skills that are going to be required in the future? That's, of course, the first big task. But I don't think that, especially in Western societies, that you're making things easier for yourself by increasing the skills required to get into the workplace at all. And also at the same time, having very, very lax immigration policies, primarily used by, primarily taken advantage of by, if you were serious about wanting to tackle the issues of the future, forthright, then you would also have to face up with the reality of, well, maybe not everyone is able to get on this train and get up to speed with everyone else.
Well, or, I mean, one thing you might argue is if you're going to have people emigrate to your country and you really you're going to have some, you don't just want to stagnate. The countries that have immigration, some level of immigration succeed. Now, you can argue how much is too much for sure, but you can't just bring them. This is just, I guess, my opinion, but I think I'm pretty passionate about it. If you bring someone into your country, you cannot then just say, all right, dust off your hands. We're done. We did it. We brought them to the country. It should be incumbent on you to make sure they become educated. They learn whatever local customs they need to get around so that they do contribute. Because just bringing a bunch of people over and saying, we did it, we brought people over and they sweep the floors now, doesn't really help anyone if you're not, integrating them into the society in useful roles. And then that's when you get into the discussion of, like, who do you let in? Maybe we should make sure they can pass this test first, maybe. And if not, shouldn't we teach them it before? Otherwise, why are we even bringing people here?
Well, that what you touch on is the cognitive dissonance of the left in regards to immigration, where the mantra is everyone is the same, everyone is equal.
Everyone is the same, so we should make welcome. Everyone equal.
And then when people do arrive in large numbers because you invited them and you incentivize them to come with promises of benefits and grand opportunities, they then just drop the ball and don't do anything actively to actually integrate them into the workforce. Is that really caring for the immigrants, or is it simply hoping and wishing upon a star that things are going to work out if you just don't treat anyone mean?
Well, so I was just actually, before we talked today, I watched I usually watch it with breakfast every Saturday morning, the newest Bill Maher. And one of the people that was on there brought up, it seems like on the left right now, it just means you're a nicer person the more pro-immigration you are. And so everyone's kind of being forced to say they're pro-immigration so they don't come off as mean to their base.
For a lot of people, I believe that is the situation they find themselves in. Mm-hmm. What I would ask to anyone listening to this who is on the left side of politics and is very
Which can mean all different types of things. I actually have a problem with us saying left and right, but we know what you mean. Yeah.
Specifically, my question to those who are advocates of open borders, completely uncontrolled immigration,
which is kind of a new opinion.
Abolish ICE, all that.
Yeah.
My question to them would be, when we see a future in which high-skilled jobs are going to be the norm in almost every sector.
Sure.
What good do your policies then do for the home countries of these immigrants who are seeing their most skilled laborers, all of them, leave for your country? Aren't they just going to be left in the dust, even worse than they are now?
For example, that's something I've said before, is when you see like, well, immigrants are so hardworking in our country. Of course, I'm American, so I'm referencing my own country. But that's because these are the people who got up and moved. They're the people that said they wanted a better life. So just right there, you're going to probably willow out the people who are willing to at least travel a long distance. You know, when you have a country like America that's built by people who are willing to get on a boat or unfortunately forcibly brought there, they had to endure a hardship to get to a better life, whether it was forced upon them or they decided to travel here by boat. And so it really shouldn't be surprised when you see a lot of hardworking people in one place if they all had to go through a tribulation to get there. But if there isn't one, and if everyone's just coming in, you know, well, I guess I'm really saying two things then, right? I'm saying if everyone's just coming in, it's not always that. And then like you say, well, if we do just greater recruit all of these people who are the hardest working, yeah, I mean, when you look at some of the poorer countries in Latin America, you go, well, yeah, I mean, all of the scientists came to America. I mean, so what are they supposed to do over there?
Well, it's a lose-lose situation either way. And it's a complete mess. What I would like to see is at least a sane and honest discussion
Sure.
and an open debate about what could be the best solutions to solve the immigration issues going forward.
So what do you think? I mean, yeah.
What do I think would be the best solution?
It's hard to. I would say best is a very loaded and maybe a presumptive word, but what do you think could be the solution?
What do I think could be the solution?
Yeah.
Well, I think perhaps without being impolite, without being too harsh, while also protecting the interests of your own citizens, I think the best solution would be to, well, first of all, clamp down on illegal immigration and just get that out of the way to begin with. That's step one. Step two would be ensure that you're only accepting immigrants from nations where the people coming in integrate well into society.
Well, so wouldn't a more positive way of saying that be to focus on making sure there is good integration? Because I think, personally speaking, it's a little reductive to say only let them in from countries where they integrate well. Well, it's like, well, there's just no effort put into integrating them. So there's smart people in every country. There is. And if you put in the effort and made sure they had to pass a certain test, I'm sure you can get, quote unquote, good people from every country, right? But you got to put in the effort to get them.
I think that a lot more could be done in the United States and in many other
Europe,
countries.
Certainly
in Sweden, yes. But
well, it's funny you say that, though, because there were, I think it was in Tennessee, there was this crackdown. So I think someone on the right got elected to crack down on illegal workers there. And then he did. And then he put all this agricultural business out, all of these agricultural companies that were voting for the right lost their businesses because they didn't realize, well, I don't know if not realize is the right term. They ignored that all of their farmers were illegal immigrants and they put themselves out of business. So I think really the takeaway again is, like you said, a holistic approach. Like immigration countries like Rome, I don't know if you want to call it a country, or like these former mega states had substantial immigration from people from all over the world, had people who traveled for a better life and worked harder than other people, but that they didn't also, but that looking at this situation should not just be from one side or the other, that there's probably an answer, but we're not going to find the perfect balance unless everyone's bringing facts and speaking openly about it. Because there are very real problems. If you ignore them, well, they only get worse. You
Well,
know.
the first step in finding a solution to anything is, of course, being honest about what the problem is, where the
Right.
issues lie. Um, I'm not entirely sure that we're there yet. I hope we might be in a couple of years.
Um, I think we're going to start getting there pretty soon. I'm not going to predict
Yeah,
right when we get there, but I think you can start to see shifting in people acknowledging things more and more now. Everywhere too. I think I think there's certainly some loud voices that aren't listening still in a lot of different directions right now, but I'm starting to see some real shifts. I mean, and like for my job, I travel all over the country, all over the Midwest. I mean, that's why this podcast is called Flyover States. Is it's like I talk to
yeah.
so many different people all over a wide area, and you can feel the wind changing on certain things, and I mean, there's only so long you can yell the same thing and say, well, that doesn't seem to be true. So why are we still pretending this?
It's okay. We can work through these issues. They're not insurmountable.
Yeah. Well, so I think I kind of want to start tying this up pretty quickly. I guess I want to bring up one more subject, just kind of to try to tie what we're talking about to automation, and that's I think we're going to keep rolling through new industrial revolutions, and I think a lot of people say the information age was like the 90s through 2000s. Like finally, everyone can have access to info instantly. It's not letters, and I think that's still evolving now, like the implications of being able to say anything to anyone anywhere on earth in this like not able. I mean, they trying to hide knowledge, but it still doesn't really work. I think the next age is going to be kind of a somewhat instant. The next mega uplifting in society could be caused by a near instant travel.
Oh, who knows where maglev is going to take us in the future?
Yeah.
But one thing I think that is for certain is we're going to be seeing software integration that will allow us to check in when we're, say, in the Uber on the way to the airport,
Mm-hmm.
and then get on the plane immediately and then
Yes.
take off again immediately. I think that's where we're going to be seeing the big improvements. But as far as cost per fleet, cost per seat flight mile, those changes are going to be very incremental. They're going to continue to, of course, iterate on engine design, develop materials that are lighter, stronger, and allow us to fly further using the same amount of fuel, allow us to fly quieter, which would open up smaller airports to larger aircraft, etc. But these challenges are not trivial, and
Of course
already
not.
we're really bumping up against the physical limitations of what we're
Well, yeah,
being
but
able
if
to do.
only there was some race of mammals that was incredibly good at solving problems with creativity
Oh,
and
yeah.
science. I guess that's what
I'm
I'm
not
saying.
black-pilled at all on the future of humanity. I see challenges. I hope that we're better able to deal with those challenges in the future. I think we're going to be better able to deal with those challenges in the future. But we'll get there.
I think that's where I'm going to stop this then, because, well, I
Yeah,
have
that's
another
good.
guest to talk to, to be honest. So there is kind of a hard cutoff at a certain point, but perhaps we'll do this again. And when it comes to crypto, yep, my next, within a month, a Broken Silicon's coming out that's already been recorded with Stefan Livera, who is an
Yeah.
Austrian economist. And you might enjoy that one then, but that's a whole other discussion that will, I will say that though too at the end though, that I guess I should have said besides Bitcoin. I think that's the only other next thing that could possibly upheave us as much as instant information. But
There are many disruptive technologies coming down the pipe.
yeah, only is the wrong word. Those are two that I see though, that I'm confident in, I suppose, as would be able to have the same effect as instant information. But again, let's save that for another discussion. Is there anything you want to say at the end here? Plug or...
Well, if you want to check out my channel, again, my name is Simon Penro. My channel is simply Penro on YouTube.
Mhm.
I cover mostly philosophy, moral philosophy. And I'm also I'm currently in the process of writing a book, which is intended to be a counterpart to Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, but focused on practical advice, specifically directed to men who seek family life. I'm going to be making some videos, possibly even a podcast series maybe in the future. It's going to be...
Do you know the title of what this book will be at? Probably not. The
well,
only reason I say
works.
that is this isn't YouTube. This is a podcast, so people will go back and listen to this a year from now.
It's going to be the quest for fatherhood. It's going to be the Prima strategy guide for men.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good name, so we at least know that.
Yeah, I'm Prima bankrupt, so they can't sue me for using that either.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. Especially at what time is it where you are right now?
Oh, it's midnight.
Yeah, especially at this time. Yeah, I don't know. Good luck. I'll look for that
some
book.
Sleep. It's been
All
nice.
right.
Thank you.
And all these cuts and bruises are just stories of Massachusetts.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good, having listened to it doing a final pass 5 months after it was first recorded. And I do apologize to Simon again for how long this took to come out. Simon Penrose, he's links in the description for those who want to look him up. Actually, let me say that too. I will have more guests coming on, and I do intend to have an episode every few months or so. Maybe more often if this takes off. That's up to you guys to spread the word of this podcast, by the way, to tell people in the comments on YouTube and, on different podcast apps. Hey, did you know you had another podcast? I'm not endorsing anyone who comes on, really ever in the future. I'm not even really endorsing myself, except that I hope it's an entertaining discussion to listen to. You don't have to agree with my guests. You don't have to like their stuff. You don't have to agree with everything I say. The only thing I do hope is that you enjoy the discussion, because that's really what Flyover States is about. And I will be bringing in people from quite different corners of the internet and political opinions, I believe, based on some people I'm talking to right now. So just keep that in mind. Open-mindedness, that's what I'm looking for here. And really, for being honest, selfishly keeping myself out of a bubble, because however well any of these conversations go, I feel just forcing myself to talk to different people I normally wouldn't talk to all over the United States and all over the world. Well, just that little bit will hopefully stop me from becoming full of shit. And that us talking to each other can't hurt. I really think a lot of the problems going on right now, the bigger ones, are coming from a lack of honest communication. And I hope I'm just 0.0001% of the solution. The following podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and select technical editing by Carbon Cry. You can find all of our information, including how to get a hold of us, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. And if you are a fan and would like to send mail or other hardware, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 10468, Peoria, Illinois 61612. And speaking of fans, without exaggeration, the patrons are solely responsible for the continued distribution of the content you just listened to. And so if you have some extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you. I am one of them. The Discord is only at $1, and at higher tiers you get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the back catalog of Flyover States podcast, thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts, and other perks as well. And if you cannot afford to support us, please just share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media and Reddit. And give Broken Silicon and Flyover States a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. All of this really does help so much more than I think anyone realizes. If you'd like to advertise on the podcast or a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its fans supporting it. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels. Bootman, Carbon Cry, Dean, Benny Berlin, Justin Yunt, Thomas Rupp, I Love You, Lynn and Jim Bollocks, Joshua Alvin, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Frederick Lau, James Krasta, Justin Parrish, Zachary Martin, Terrence Herod, Brad Medlin, Phil S. Thyrister, The Ninth Dude, Greg Renegar, TSP CFS, Chrysantine, Night Rogue 77, The Mechanical Philosopher, Lebo King Kilo, Fatboy Diesel, Daniel Hyde, Matthew McMullen, Christoph Novak, Jack O'Neill, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, Sexy, VI Pass, Sadler, Isaiah Gosner, Alethros, Telos, Hey There's a Kitty, Greg T. Wanchuk, Jacob Barber, Exoti, Hector Santana, Matthew Lane, Paul Jones, Jan Rauner, Robert Duck, Street of Full, Ali Robertson, Eric Jackson, Jonathan, Job, Evan Dingle, Dominic Koch, Stefan, Original Ross, Wayne, Sam MacArthur, Total Silo, Sol Connor, Michael Costa, Andrew S., Blake, Aaron Keith, Kerry Baldino, Endless Logan, Tom Sanfilippo, Justice Brennan, Ivan K., Trevor Powers, Garrick Scholl, Alenia, Joshua Staveness, Daniel Nishbal, Franco Frederic, Hardware Numbers, Alex Carastillo, Dark Rain 2049, Leighton Perry, Mac, Carlos Valdez, Carnivore Bear, and Macdo226.